Open hailing frequencies.
Hailing frequencies open.
Repulse, this is the Enterprise. We are getting underway.
Acknowledged, Enterprise.
Hello, welcome to Star Trek Sodium. We have Star Trek The Next Generation, Series 2, Episode 1, and I've got some fantastic facts that I've found out all about it. Now, in this first episode of Season 2, Deanna Troi gets made pregnant by a mysterious alien entity that wishes to learn more about the human race. She gives birth to a beautiful baby boy, which she names Ian, possibly after the James Bond creator Ian Fleming. The story was originally written for the 1970s Star Trek series Star Trek Phase 2, which never quite made it to the screen, but which was used here so not to waste a good script, and because there was a writer's strike on, and so a script that was already written seemed perfect for use. Speaking of James Bond, this episode was the debut episode of popular character Dr. Pulaski, the ship's new chief medical officer. Both Dr. Pulaski and Guinan make their debuts together in the 10 Forward Lounge, which incidentally is titled 10 Forward because it's in the forward end of Deck 10 and not because it's named after a different bar on Earth with the address 10 Forward Street, according to terminally incorrect and vaguely Star Trek series Picard, which seems to run on the fuel of endless references. Captain Picard and Dr. Pulaski have a strange and interesting dynamic, which blossoms during the season as Gates McSomething's replacement really starts to blossom like a black moonlight black flower. The new Dr. Crusher actress used in Series 2 is Diana Muldaur as Dr. Pulaski. Dr. Pulaski's role was advertised, and after a while it was whittled down to hundreds of possibilities, and they got it down to only 3 contenders for the acting part. The first actress considered was Zelda Rubinstein, the second Diana Muldaur, and the third actor was giant-fisted tough man Brian Dennehy, whose sympathetic roles in Rambo and To Catch a Killer had caught the attention of the casting team. Now, the genesis of the idea of Deanna Troi getting made pregnant was primarily driven by the inspiration of women in the real world having babies. They took this idea and ran with it, adding the alien component of Star Trek being set in space. Looking at the original script by improbably named Jaron Summers and John Povell, it uncovers some interesting titty bits. Not only was Deanna Troi nowhere to be seen during the original 1977 script, but there wasn't even one mention of Captain Picard or Dr. Pulaski in the story. No wonder they had to make a number of changes to include these characters when it was actually filmed.
You rarely see my character being relaxed.
Rick Berman would claim that due to the popularity of Star Trek Next Generation, you couldn't go onto any webpage on the internet without there being hundreds of Star Trek fans on it talking about Star Trek. Even though this would be great, I very much doubt it's correct.
You couldn't go on any of the early internet web pages without finding hundreds of people talking about Star Trek, thousands.
Shortly after finishing the filming of Season 1, Riker actor, Deanna Troi actor, and Will Wheaton actor had a bet, the loser of which had to get their face tattooed with a warping Enterprise image. The loser of the bet was Jonathan Frakes, who got the amazing starship tattooed on his chin for all to see. He thought it would show the rest of the production team how committed he was, and would also look good on the screen as part of a committed Star Trek commander, but unfortunately Rick Berman demanded that Frakes grow a beard in time for filming to conceal the ungodly image, as he called it. So in the 3 months between filming, Jonathan Frakes was pressured to stop shaving, and he returned to work for Series 2 with a big boy beard, which would also help him to gain roles in TV movie productions as both a pirate and as a beard salesman. Unfortunately, this episode was the last audio appearance of the Man, who voiced the opening sound of the door aboard the Enterprise. He had been doing this since 1966, through the first 4 movies and in Star Trek Next Generation up until this point. To make the door sounds more authentic, he would make the sound live each time. He would stand there and say "Choo" as the door opened, and Paramount would not use recordings of his voice due to copyright reasons. After this episode, the "Choo" sound was made by Lady Crane until Star Trek ended at the end of Enterprise in 2005.
Engage. No, don't engage. Energize.
An interesting note about this episode's first run on television is that the studio had decided on an important change to the commercial breaks. Instead of the commercial breaks being 3 minutes long like in Series 1, this season's breaks were ordered to be only 2 minutes per break, but they had a problem of what to do with the extra minute. They eventually decided that they would fill up this extra minute in each break with adverts, topping them up to a crazy 3 minutes. Famous actor Whoopi Goldberg makes her Star Trek debut here. The original plan was for Elorians to be humanoid aliens which live for hundreds of years, balance on their heads, and are a race of listeners. In her opening scene, Goldberg was supposed to be balancing upside down on her head in 10 forward, but she kept falling sideways, and so had to wear a special hat that was flat-topped and was designed to keep her holding her balance. She managed to balance upside down for one line of dialogue using her special flat hat before falling sideways, smashing bottles and glasses all over the bar. It was at this time that she issued the ultimatum to Rick Berman. She either portrays a standing normally character or she leaves. As a punishment for this insolence, Rick Berman made her keep the unwieldy flat hat as a reminder of her toppling indignities. Even though this is Series 2, it has no relation to the 1967 Season 2 of the original series or to Star Trek Part 2 The Return of Khan, except for the obvious link of the burgeoning Star Trek universe.
Pulaski is being played by Diana Muldaur, who played twice in the original Star Trek series and who I have admired for years.
It was hoped by Gene Roddenberry that Series 2 would appeal to the same fans that enjoyed both the original series and the Star Trek movies, although this time there had been absolutely no research into the comparative enjoyment levels of the fans between these 3 different parts of the Star Trek timeline. Now, there were several wars in 1988, but none of them were quite as big as the war of science fiction that was fought in the USA in 1988. The war of Star Trek and Short Circuit 2 would keep both franchises in the headlines for several months, as these 2 Goliaths of the silver screen would go head-to-head with actors from both productions bad-mouthing the other with little provocation. For example, one Star Trek actor would claim that Short Circuit 2 was as stupid as a pile of fish, whereas a Short Circuit 2 actor, Theobald Ruggo, claimed that Star Trek Next Generation was nothing but dirt on the shoe of a dead homeless slug collector. Luckily, this war only lasted 1 year, as Star Trek was ongoing, but Short Circuit 2 came and went, like a bad memory, like an episode of Discovery, except with a lot less awful bits. Well, thanks for listening to my very good facts about The Child. Episode 1 of Season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. Hit that subscribe button unless you don't want to, and come back next time. We'll see what episode we have next time for Star Trek Sodium. I expect it'll be Episode 2 of Season 2. All the best. Bye now.